Welcome back to Getting Personal. I'm Jack, your host, and I'm excited to be here today with Ed, Dev Relations at Hedera for Swirlds Labs. How are you doing, and are you ready to get personal, Ed?
I'm doing great, Jack. I'm definitely ready. I'm very happy to be here. So thanks for inviting me.
Amazing. Looking forward to this. Let's start with a hot take, shall we? What, in your eyes, what makes Hashgraph superior to blockchain?
That is a fantastic question. What I like about Hashgraph is that it's actually a decentralized or leaderless algorithm, whereas compared to other consensus algorithms that are out there in other networks, they're just decentralized networks of centralized blocks, right? Whereas the Hashgraph completely eliminates those leader-based moments. So you can say it's truly decentralized. There's no single point of failure in that regard when it comes to the technology side of things. And so that gives you crazy benefits when it comes to sustain or reliability and also minimizing the downtime for the whole system.
Great. And now I'm going to switch it back to you personally. I'd love to hear a little bit of your backstory and who you were before Web3, before Swirlds Labs, before Hedera. Who was Ed?
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training, so that's where I had been working for the past, almost decade before I came to Hedera and Swirlds Labs. I focused on control systems and developing algorithms that end up in systems like cars, hybrid cars, industrial automation, in robotics and things like that. And so there's a methodology called model-based design where you ultimately develop and test all of that in different platforms before you're able to deploy that in production and embed it in a system that is going to be out there in the real world. So I spent about 9 years, if you include some of the projects that I work on, doing that. And then from there, I started studying Bitcoin from the monetary side of things, the store of value narrative, just in my free time. And so just digging deeper and deeper, I ran into Hedera Hashgraph at the time, and I thought this was almost too good to be true. So I just kept watching Leemon's videos, kind of read the white paper, and I started playing with the SDKs in my free time uh, after work. And I realized this is the real deal. This is actually very interesting technology, solves real problems, and it's backed by significant players that are seeing the utility in this technology. So at the time, I also needed to make a job change, and I just applied for Hedera, and it worked out. Here I am. So at the time, about 2 years ago, I started at Hedera doing developer relations and developer evangelism, and now I am part of Swirlds Labs, which is the firm doing a lot of the engineering and marketing initiatives for the Hedera network. And so a little bit of a backstory about Hedera there is that the network basically decentralized its operations as well. So you saw entities like the HBAR Foundation spin out
Mhm.
of Hedera with the purpose of ecosystem development. And you also saw firms like Swirlds Labs coming out of Hedera for the purpose of marketing, engineering, and supporting the growth of the ecosystem as well.
And how did that happen for you? Like you find Hedera, you explore the technology and the ecosystem, and you go straight. You apply straight away for Hedera. Why did you decide to try and join Hedera or Swirlds Labs over something else, maybe?
Yeah, that's another fantastic question. I thought it was very compelling technology and a very exciting set of problems to work on. To be honest, even though model-based design and engineering and controls systems was pretty cool, I was questioning whether I wanted to do that for 20 more years of my career. And when I saw the problems that were arising and being solved in the blockchain space and the technology that Hedera was, coming up with, I saw it as a fantastic opportunity, and I just jumped right in. So happy to be here 2 years after that change.
Let's talk about those problems, right? That Hedera solves. People talk about the blockchain trilemma and how Hedera solves that. Could you tell us a little bit about how Hedera does that and what the
Right.
trilemma is, maybe first of all as well?
Let's start there. So the trilemma refers to the balancing act that needs to happen between scalability, security, and decentralization for these distributed systems like Hedera and some of the other decentralized networks we've heard of. And so I would say that Hedera tackles it in a very effective way from two different angles. The first one being the technology. So we have a consensus algorithm that we've been talking about, the Hashgraph consensus algorithm, that is very scalable in terms of throughput, very low time to finality, to the point that you can use it in applications at the point of sale. Today finality is somewhere around 3 seconds, and that is deterministic finality. It's not probabilistic. So once the transactions are in, they're in for sure at that time. And the other part of it is asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. So that is very important for security, because that enables the network to still reach consensus even in the presence of malicious actors and without the need to make assumptions about timing, right? Even if all the nodes don't receive the information right away or respond right away, the network is still able to reach consensus. And like I mentioned before, we truly eliminate leader-based moments with the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. So there you have technology that is able to scale in a very secure way and without leaders, right? With a single point of failure. But that is only one side of the story, which is technology. You have to look at the other side of it, which is, for a distributed system, you also need responsible governance. And that is the problem that Hedera also tackled very early on in a very effective way with the Hedera Governing Council. Because what that gives you is a body of global organizations that are staking their reputation that they've built over decades and centuries to guarantee the well-being of the network, right? So that gives you more transparent governance, responsible decision making, stability, diversity of ideas, because they come from different industries representing different interests, and also diversity through time, because there are term limits to how long these council members can sit on the council. So I would say that it's not a common way that we've seen in the industry, right? Approaching that trilemma from the technology side, but also from the responsible governance side. So I think that is very unique and very exciting about Hedera.
That's great. And how would you communicate that to someone outside of Web3, or even to, for example, a 10-year-old child, someone young? Like how could we break that down into the simplest terms?
Right. If we're thinking about a 10-year-old, I would say I would explain it through an analogy, basically, right? Let's imagine that you have a large group of friends that are trying to decide where to meet and play over the weekend, for instance. And so in that group of friends, you're going to have some friends that maybe they may be trying to confuse the group. Maybe they're giving bad suggestions or bad choices. You're also going to have a group of friends, or a portion of friends, who don't respond right away. They're very slow to read the information and respond. And then you're also going to have friends, hopefully the majority, who are honest friends trying to make good decisions and go to a nice place to play and have fun. And so as long as you have a majority of honest friends, the Hashgraph consensus is a very smart way for the group to still reach a good decision on where to meet and play over the weekend, regardless of all the obstacles that we mentioned, of dishonest friends and friends that don't respond right away. So hopefully that is simple enough for a 10-year-old to follow.
Yeah,
But yes, and the other thing is, it works every time thanks to math and science. So that's another important aspect to consider there.
I love that analogy. That was really great. Um, Shifting gears a little bit here, if you had to comment on the three most important points for building a DApp on Hedera, what would they be in your mind?
I would start with your goals, right? Make sure you align your goals with the unique values that Hedera has to offer. So you've been learning about the hash graph and the benefits that that gives. So, make sure that it is the right solutions for the problems that you're trying to solve, and that it aligns with your goals. And then make sure you also understand some of those unique features and services that Hedera has to offer, because a lot of people think, oh, these decentralized networks only do smart contracts. But Hedera has to offer more than that. We have the Hedera consensus service. If you need to log your own transactions and notarize and timestamp them to basically create immutable records that you can share with others. So useful in areas like supply chain, for instance. We also have the Hedera token service, which is a great solution if you're trying to tokenize anything from shoes to software licenses to carbon assets, all without the need to create and develop smart contracts. And of course, we have the smart contract service to do all the programmability and flexibility that we're familiar with in Web3. So I would say that's the first part, right? Aligning goals with what the network has to offer and understanding that offering. The second point would probably be around understanding the ecosystem of tools and options that are available to you, right? Once you know that this is the right solution for you, that it aligns with your goals, how do you actually jump into solving the problem? And on Hedera, you have multiple options available. You have the Hedera SDKs, you have the mirror node APIs to retrieve historical data, but you also have access to a rich ecosystem of EVM tools that you can use on Hedera, right? And you have JSON RPC providers like Archaea, you have network explorers, and some of the EVM frameworks that we're familiar with, like Hardhat, Foundry, and others. So make sure you understand those options so that you can be sure of what you're going to integrate in your solution. And then the last point, I would say, I have to say something about community, right? And Hedera has a strong, vibrant community. So make sure you get that support that you need and that input that you need from the community. And once you've been able to build and kind of try things out in the testnet, feel free to give back to the ecosystem, right? Contribute back in the form of Discord, maybe Stack Overflow questions, maybe mentoring some of the other projects. But there's definitely plenty of opportunity there to work with the community, whether it's receiving value and giving value back as well. And maybe you can become an open source contributor, right? Everything on Hedera is open source software, from the Hashgraph to all the SDKs and things built above the Hashgraph consensus. So there's plenty of opportunity if you need to develop and build a platform as you grow as well.
That's great. I'm going to throw it back to you. I want to ask you what a typical day looks like for dev relations at Swirlds Labs.
Very interesting role. There's definitely no 2 days that look the same. But I would say when we think about the goals for this area, it's about ensuring developer success, right? We're very focused on developers. And so how do we make sure that they can discover the network, find what Hedera is, that it actually solves their problems. And from there, make a quick jump into evaluating the network, maybe trying out the SDKs, maybe trying some examples, and making sure that it's actually the solution that they're looking for their problem. And then from there, our goal is to make sure that those developers can easily learn the solutions, right? The services, the features, the API. So we need compelling, high quality content and value for those developers. But ultimately, we also want them to deploy in production, be able to build and grow with the network, right? And for building, we need to reduce as many friction points as possible, make sure that they have the support that they need, that their answers can be responded or answered in a timely manner, and all of that, and that once their product starts growing, the network can also evolve to match those needs that developers may have. So from discoverability to evaluation to learning to building to scaling, that's basically the framework that we're trying to follow here in developer relations. And so for myself and members of the team, it may be from creating content to answering, some questions on Discord, to perhaps doing some internal evaluations to identify where we can reduce friction points, maybe contribute to documentation, maybe plug some gaps in that developer experience, maybe building a learning curriculum. That's something that one of my teammates has been working on very hard. So definitely a lot of diversity in different tasks and areas that we work on.
Absolutely. I've been seeing a lot of great content lately, so that's definitely happening for you.
Awesome. Great to hear it.
You mentioned before you joined Hedera that that you were playing around with SDKs as if it was kind of like a hobby, like it's something that you're passionate about, right? So I'd love to ask you, since you've been at Hedera, exploring it over the past couple of years, what's something that surprised you on about Hedera, something you didn't expect?
That is another fantastic question, Jack. Probably I would say the level of commitment of the whole ecosystem, right? From how passionate the enthusiast and retail community is about kind of driving awareness of the network, but also the commitment of the application builders, from the people building the wallets to the exchanges to the NFT platforms to the solutions for sustainability. That has been fantastic to witness. And when we think about it, we're in an industry that is so young, and these application developers have been able to deploy things in a very fast and agile manner. So that is definitely surprising in a good way. um, I would say also the passion of the engineers that are maintaining and contributing to the code base, right, from the Hashgraph consensus to the SDKs and APIs. Extremely talented people that are truly committed to the network. And you can also see that in how frequent the code is upgraded, how frequent the contributions happen to the code base. So that is really cool to see, and it's a blessing to be able to work with those smart folks. And one more would be about the level of interest and engagement of the council members. In fact, that was one of the original reasons that kind of brought me over to Hedera, to see that enterprise interest that was in Hedera. And you can certainly see that from the meeting minutes, that they continue to be engaged, they continue to be interested in exploring ways to adopt the technology for some of their use cases and solutions, right? And that's why we see, POCs and actual offerings of tokenization of funds and, maybe tracking items when it comes to sustainability or supply chain. And I'm sure we'll see much more to come from the governing council and hopefully enterprises outside of the council too.
For sure, for sure. And on the flip side of that, what do you think are the points to improve at a general level right now in Hedera?
I would say I'll tie this back to that developer relations framework, right? There's plenty of work that we can always do there, and it touches on not only developers, but also everyone. I think one is this driving the discoverability and awareness about the network for developers and for everyone, right? There's always more that we could do there, and plenty of opportunity. I also think that once you've driven that discoverability, it's critical that we reduce friction points, whether it's for retail or for developers. You want to make sure that people can have an easy onboarding experience, that they can start very quickly, open a wallet, or get their testnet account very easily and start testing very quickly. And the other part of it is making sure that once that onboarding has happened, making sure that they continue to remain engaged, right, with high quality content, high quality nurturing campaigns. And so I think that's probably an area where we could do a lot more, and continue to learn from what has worked in other industries, perhaps in Web 2, and making sure that we drive that awareness and discoverability for the network as well.
And how about yourself, like personally, which would you say has been your biggest challenge in Web3 so far?
I think this one is related to web development, period, but there's always new tools. You're constantly learning about new technologies and frameworks and, different ways of solving things. So even though it keeps the work very engaging, right, because you're always learning, and I'm naturally very curious, there comes a time where, you would be able to perhaps move a lot faster if things were not changing as much, when it comes to the tooling and the options that you have. But it's part of the space, I guess.
It's fast, isn't it? It's hard to keep up, for sure. I can relate.
Absolutely. Yes.
And this next question, I think it's something that the community will really appreciate as well. I do see it on the timeline from time to time. What plans, from what you know, what plans does Hedera have in regards to marketing in 2024? And do you think we're going to start seeing some more hype besides the substance? Because we know there's a lot of substance, right? But people want
Right.
some hype. So are we going to get that hype in 2024, do you think?
Yeah. Like you said, always focused on the substance, the true value that the technology is driving. And I'm sure there's also going to be substantial new developments that will be worth talking about and doing a lot of promotion on. What I can tell you around areas of focus, we have, I believe, somewhere between 5 and 6 themes or areas of focus that we want to push heavily. One being consumer engagement and loyalty programs, I think the offering that Hedera has, when it comes to services and ecosystem, are very well aligned with what we could do in that area. Also, with real world and the tokenization or the tokenization of real world assets, I think that is another area where Hedera can provide significant contributions and solve problems very effectively. From stable coins to tokenizing things in carbon offsets and carbon assets, that's a great opportunity as well. And also tokenization of financial funds like bonds, stocks, or perhaps even real estate, that I think there's a big market opportunity there. And there are others around data integrity, sustainability, and policy. I think the policy one is a big one, especially in North America, where there's a big opportunity to work with regulators and policymakers to make sure that they bring effective regulation so that the technology can be applied and solve problems in society.
Mm-hmm. And switching now a little bit to another gear on the topic of DeFi, because some would say that the DeFi ecosystem hasn't gained as much traction as maybe they'd like to see within Hedera. What would it need to do so, do you think?
I think the opportunity there is for the infrastructure of the ecosystem to grow and welcome new contributors, right? I think we have seen DeFi play a good role with SaucerSwap, HeliSwap, and I believe SaucerSwap recently deployed Uniswap v3 on Hedera as well, and we're seeing very healthy growth of TVL on the network. But we have an opportunity to bring more bridges, more oracles, to improve the liquidity of the whole ecosystem and just to bring more participation from different communities as well. And so I think that's where the opportunity is, right? Making sure that we drive that awareness about the network and invite those integrations with other infrastructure providers so that we can welcome new capital and new interest and new investors in the network.
For sure. And where would you like to see yourself and Hedera? You could break it down into a two-part answer if you'd like. In 5 years, where would you like to see yourself and Hedera?
Hopefully still here driving the growth of the network. I'm still very passionate about what I'm doing here with the ecosystem. Hopefully a much larger community, a much larger set of deployed use cases in production. And I would like to see perhaps new council members that are deploying use cases on the network as well, from multiple industries, whether it's, technology and online offerings to aerospace and more traditional engineering worlds. Perhaps an automotive council member, would love to see that. And perhaps, just an interesting one for me, I would like to see a node in Antarctica, so that we truly cover all geographies.
Bringing it closer to where we are now, looking into 2024. What are you most excited about?
For 2024, I would say I'm very excited about the further decentralization of the network, right? I think this is the year where we're very likely to see KYC'd community nodes, which is a step towards reaching anonymous nodes. And so I think the engineering team, will continue their hard work. They'll perhaps have some specs that we can share with the community, and then we'll hopefully see those come on board, whether it's an H1 or H2 of 2024. I think that's going to be a crucial step for the network to take. And, it'll be a great way to also dispel a lot of the concerns that are out there floating in the form of misinformation, where people tend to think that Hedera is not truly decentralized. But the reality is that we have taken a phased approach to decentralization by virtue of being a proof of stake network. It makes a lot of sense and it's a very reasonable approach. And so definitely glad and excited about seeing those initial steps in this direction.
Let's unpack that a little bit, because it's something that really drew me into Hedera, and I really like the idea of progressive decentralization, right? And so if you could unpack that misinformation on here right now, that'd be great.
Right. So Perhaps some of the criticisms that I've seen online are that, Hedera is only a set of 29 or 39 nodes and only permission nodes. Well, the reality is that it makes sense to start in that way because when you're a proof of stake network, it's very easy to um, for any one player to accumulate a lot of stake in your network and then compromise the consensus. And so that is something that we want to avoid first from the stake distribution, right? And the other part is the decision making that is driven by the council. It makes sense to evolve the set of nodes as that governance model evolves. I mentioned term limits. So hopefully what will happen over time is that new council members will come, but the original nodes of the members that were in the council will remain with the network. So that's how you see that, the enterprise nodes will grow to be more than 39. And then hopefully before that happens, we're also going to enable the community nodes that I mentioned. And those are the steps that will lay the foundation to be able to grow to have the anonymous nodes. But bringing it all back, the purpose is to avoid any one party from accumulating too much stake that can compromise the consensus of the network, and to allow for the organic decentralization of the nodes across the globe. And so I think that is the approach that Hedera has taken. It's going to take some time, naturally, but some of the things that Leemon and Mans have said before is that we're trying to build a network that is going to be around for 100 years plus, right? So Rome wasn't built in a day, and hopefully we're laying a foundation that will kind of keep us around for the next 100 years plus.
Love it. And back to you now again. What's something outside of Web3, like when you take some time away to just to disconnect from Web3 and recharge? What's something that you love to do personally?
I love to be very active physically, anything that moves the body. So very passionate about hiking, backcountry camping. I have a couple of dogs that are also very active, and so my wife and I take the dogs for long walks, long hikes. We like to get up on a mountain or take a road trip. And recently, I've been getting into golf. I never thought I would like
Right.
it, but there's a lot of technique and challenge to it. I had tendonitis for about 2 weeks when I started, but that's all gone, and my technique is slowly improving. So those are some of the things that I like to do, and I also like to explore the creative side. I like hobbies like playing piano and guitar, much better at the piano than the guitar. So if you ever are interested in kind of getting together and having a jam session, I'm down to do that with community members or Kabila members as well.
Love it. I've never been able to play an instrument. I think I tried it when I was small. I think I tried the keyboard and a couple of things, but I do play golf. So we'll definitely have to have a game of golf one day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Nice. I always love to ask at the end, if there was, what is there any topic or that we haven't touched on, or a question that you'd like that I would have asked but I didn't, and how would you have answered?
Well, one question that I would like to ask you as a member of the community in a project that is very active, driving a lot of growth and a lot of awareness and education about the network. Let me ask you, what would you like to see, or what have you heard from the community that you would like to see uh, from the Hedera network, or from the contributors like Swirlds Labs? Where can we do better, and what does the community expect?
So the first thing that comes to mind, because I hear it every day, not every day, but quite often from a lot of different projects, and they're really waiting to be able to implement so many new features and fun things for their communities and NFTs, is the dynamic metadata. Like
Hmm.
we know it's there, right? It's been passed, it's coming, but the community is just excited to open that door, right? Because it just brings about so many different possibilities for them to get creative and engage with their community and beyond. So that's what comes to mind when you ask that question, for sure.
Love it, love it, and I totally agree. I think dynamic NFTs are going to open very interesting doors and very interesting possibilities for the ecosystem and also for the whole space, um, and the things that will be built on Hedera. So good
Yeah,
feedback.
we're looking forward to that, I think, as a whole. Well,
Yeah,
that's all the questions I have for you today, Ed. That was great. I really appreciate you for doing this, being here, and your time. I hope that I'm sure they will. The community will enjoy getting personal with you when this goes out.
Love it. Very happy to be here again, Jack. And thank you so much. Working with you guys is always a delight. You know, whether it's on Twitter Spaces or interviews like this one, I'm always happy to jump on calls with you guys and help drive that awareness and that education about the Hedera ecosystem.
Amazing. That's what we're all about. Thanks again, Ed.